Mark Jefferies. The name itself would send shivers down the spines of even the most hardened settlers in the penal colony of Van Diemen's Land. He was a beast in human form, a monster whose depravity knew no bounds. From the unforgiving shores of Scotland, he had been cast out, condemned to the ends of the earth for his crimes. Little did the authorities know, they were unleashing a terror, the likes of which the colony had never seen. This is the story of Mark Jefferies, the cannibal of Macquarie Harbour. Jefferies hailed from Aberdeen, Scotland, a world away from the harsh realities of colonial Australia. Details of his early life are shrouded in the mists of time, lost to the annals of history. What we do know is that he was convicted of stealing, a seemingly petty crime that belied the darkness that festered within. Transported to Van Diemen's Land in 1822, Jefferies found himself shackled to a fate far worse than he could have imagined. The journey itself was a nightmare, months crammed into the fetid belly of a prison hulk, the air thick with the stench of sweat, vomit, and despair. Upon arrival, Jefferies was thrust into the brutal penal system of early 19th century Australia. Life as a convict was one of unrelenting toil, meager rations, and constant brutality. The lash was the ever-present instrument of control, biting into flesh for the slightest infraction. But Macquarie Harbour, where Jefferies was soon to be sent, was a different breed of hell. Macquarie Harbour, a desolate peninsula on the western coast of Tasmania, was a place of utter despair. Surrounded by treacherous seas and impenetrable forests, it was known as the Devil's Island, a place from which escape was deemed impossible. Here, amidst the towering pines and the chilling wind that howled like a banshee, the British established a penal colony designed to break the most hardened criminals. The convicts sent to Macquarie Harbour were a mixture of the desperate and the depraved, thieves, murderers, and political prisoners, all lumped together in this godforsaken place. The work was backbreaking, felling timber in the dense rainforests, hauling logs through mud and mire, their bodies racked with exhaustion and their spirits crushed by the sheer hopelessness of their situation. But it was the hunger that gnawed at them, that drove them to the brink of madness. Rations were meager and often rotten, barely enough to sustain life. The guards, hardened and brutal men themselves, showed little mercy. Escape, though seemingly impossible, became an obsession, a flicker of hope in the suffocating darkness. For Mark Jefferies, this glimmer of hope would soon ignite into a desperate and terrifying plan. The year was 1824. Jefferies, along with 9 other convicts, saw their chance. A ship, the Cyprus, lay anchored in the harbor, being loaded with timber. It represented their only hope, their one shot at freedom. The plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal. They would overpower the guards, seize the ship, and sail to freedom. On the appointed day, chaos erupted. Jefferies and his gang, armed with whatever crude weapons they could fashion, launched their desperate bid for freedom. They took the guards by surprise, their rage fueled by years of pent-up anger and desperation. The struggle was short, brutal, and bloody. The convicts, their eyes wild with a mix of fear and exhilaration, were victorious. The Cyprus, with its unsuspecting crew, was now in their hands. They forced the captain, at gunpoint, to set sail. Their escape from Macquarie Harbour was a testament to their desperation, their will to live, no matter the cost. Little did they know, their ordeal was far from over. The open sea held its own perils, and a far more insidious enemy lurked within their ranks, the gnawing pangs of hunger. The Cyprus, seized by desperation, became a vessel of fear. The initial euphoria of escape soon gave way to the grim reality of their situation. They were free from Macquarie Harbour, yes, but they were now adrift, lost on a vast and unforgiving ocean. Supplies dwindled with each passing day. The meager rations they had managed to seize during the takeover were soon exhausted. Hunger, that gnawing, relentless beast, began to consume them. Their bodies, weakened by years of hard labor and deprivation, began to fail. The endless expanse of the ocean mocked them, a cruel reminder of their isolation. Tensions ran high. The escapees, once united by a common goal, now eyed each other with suspicion. The bonds of camaraderie, forged in the fires of shared suffering, began to fray. Survival, in its rawest and most primal form, became the only imperative. It was then, amidst the despair and the encroaching madness, that the unthinkable was suggested. Cannibalism, that most taboo of acts, became a horrifying reality. The details are too gruesome to recount, the acts too depraved to comprehend. But driven by the primal instinct to survive, Jefferies and his cohorts crossed the line that separates man from beast. The Cypress, once their vessel of hope, had transformed into a floating charnel house. Among this grim company, Mark Jefferies emerged as a figure of particular dread. The petty thief from Aberdeen had transformed into something monstrous, his humanity devoured by the abyss of survival. He was no longer simply a desperate escapee, but a predator, reveling in the terror he inflicted. The others, weakened and terrified, were easy prey. One incident, recounted years later by a surviving member of the gang, cemented Jefferies' reputation as a heartless fiend. A young convict, barely more than a boy, was traveling with his infant child. The child, already weak from hunger, succumbed to the harsh conditions. Jefferies, his eyes glinting with a terrifying light, proposed a horrifying solution. The child, he argued, was already gone. Its flesh could sustain them, give them the strength to reach land. What followed was a scene of unimaginable barbarity. The father, helpless to protect his child even in death, could only watch in horror as Jefferies carried out his gruesome plan. The act, even amidst the horrors they had already committed, sent a chill through the remaining survivors. Jefferies, his face smeared with blood, seemed to relish in their terror. He had become the butcher of Macquarie Harbor, a fiend who had abandoned all humanity. Their reign of terror, fueled by human flesh, could not last forever. The, battered by storms and poor navigation, drifted aimlessly for weeks. Land, when it finally appeared, offered little solace. They had reached the northern coast of Tasmania, a wild and unforgiving landscape. Their supplies were gone, their bodies ravaged by starvation and their minds teetering on the edge of madness. They were forced to abandon their escape vessel, now a rotting hulk, and venture inland. Their journey was marked by violence and despair. They raided homesteads, terrorizing settlers, and stealing whatever food they could find. But word of their brutality preceded them. The colonists, hardened pioneers themselves, were not about to be terrorized by a band of escaped convicts, no matter how desperate. A bounty was placed on their heads, and posses were formed to hunt them down. The net was closing in. One by one, the escapees were captured or killed. Some, driven mad by their ordeal, chose to end their own lives rather than be taken alive. Jefferies, however, remained elusive, a phantom haunting the nightmares of settlers. But even he, the cannibal of Macquarie Harbor, could not outrun justice forever. Jefferies' capture was as dramatic as his escape. Cornered in a farmer's barn, surrounded by armed men, he fought with the ferocity of a trapped animal. But his luck had finally run out. He was subdued, shackled, and hauled back to Hobart, the capital of Van Diemen's Land, to face justice. The trial was a sensation. People flocked from all over the colony to catch a glimpse of the monster who had terrorized their land. The newspapers recounted his crimes in gruesome detail, painting him as a monster, a fiend in human form. Jefferies, for his part, remained defiant, showing no remorse for his actions. He seemed to revel in the notoriety, the fear he instilled in the hearts of his captors. The verdict, however, was never in doubt. Found guilty on multiple counts of murder, piracy, and cannibalism, Mark Jefferies was sentenced to death by hanging. On a cold, gray morning in 1825, Mark Jefferies was led to the gallows. A large crowd had gathered to witness the execution, their faces a mixture of morbid curiosity and grim satisfaction. As the noose was placed around his neck, Jefferies remained defiant to the end, his final words a curse upon his captors. Then the trapdoor swung open, and Mark Jefferies, the cannibal of Macquarie Harbor, was no more. The tale of Mark Jefferies is a chilling reminder of the brutal realities of colonial life in 19th century Australia. It is a story of desperation, of the lengths to which men will go to survive, even if it means abandoning their humanity. Yet it is also a story that forces us to confront the horrors inflicted upon those who were cast out, deemed the dregs of society, and subjected to unimaginable cruelty. The penal system of Van Diemen's Land was designed to break the human spirit, to transform men into beasts of burden. Is it any wonder, then, that some, like Mark Jefferies, embraced the darkness, becoming the very monsters they were accused of being? His story, though horrifying, serves as a stark reminder of the human capacity for both good and evil, and the indelible stain that colonialism has left on the world. The echoes of that brutality still resonate today, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the enduring legacy of our collective past. For in the end, the story of Mark Jefferies is not just about one man's descent into darkness, but about the darkness that resides within us all, waiting for the right, or perhaps wrong, moment to emerge.